Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining the Jefferson Educational Society's digital program, Connecting Erie, an overview of high-speed passenger rail planning for the Erie County, Pennsylvania. I'm Angela Bowman. I'm the Director of Programming at the Jefferson. Folks, as we begin today, I'd like to remind everyone tuning in that we're taking our questions via the comment section on Facebook. If you have a question, please share it there as we'll work our way through as many questions from you as we can. Raven Clark, the Jefferson Satellite Program Coordinator, will help channel these questions back to us. I'd like to thank our speaker, Corinne Thomas, a Ramey Fellow and Jefferson Civic Leadership Academy graduate, for presenting her research finding today. I'd like to also thank Dr. Roth for moderating the conversation with me. Dr. Roth is a Jefferson Scholar in Residence focusing on leadership, media, and social studies. He designed, built, and facilitates the Ramey Fellowship Program, which was launched in 2018. He's the author of more than 90 book notes, a superb weekly publication series that has gained traction beyond our county limits. I'd like to note here his accomplished career in academics. From lecturing to leading, as he taught various courses on leadership, before going on to serve in administrations in Erie, to lead Notre Dame College in Cleveland as its president and president emeritus, and at St. Bonaventure University as interim president. With this, I'd like to hand over to you, Dr. Roth, to introduce our speaker and the program.
Helps if I unmute myself. Thank you, Angela, and welcome everyone. Really kind of excited about this. This is our first Ramey Fellow presentation of the 21-22 year cohort, and I think it's going to be, you're going to find this incredibly informative. A couple of brief comments on the Ramey Fellows. Angela had mentioned the Jefferson Civic Leadership Academy, which is a leadership training program for aspiring leaders in the greater Erie and Erie County region. The Ramey Fellows program is, through the generosity of benefactor Bruce Ramey, is an adjunct to the Leadership Academy, responding to some alumni's requests several years ago for two things, a little bit of leadership theory and the opportunity perhaps to do some individual research. So the Ramey Fellows actually consist, the Ramey Fellows program consists of two parts, a 5 or 6, I can't actually remember this year, Corinne, a 5 or 6 mini seminar session on leadership theory and notions of leadership. And then of course, as you're going to hear today, and the first of what I hope to be 5 or 6 presentations, independent research project. Today, Corinne will be telling us about Connecting Erie, an overview of high-speed passenger rail planning for Erie and Erie County. In 2 weeks, Sarah Provencio will be presenting Legally Me, in which she will outline the procedure that one would need to follow if one was transitioning gender, how one proceeds through the legal system in Erie County, Pennsylvania, and in the state of Pennsylvania. After, I think, a 1 or 2 week hiatus, we'll be resuming with programming. Jake Marsh will do a presentation on working with Generation Z. Susanna Faulkner is going to do a presentation on a minimal basic income program for Erie County that is modeled on successful attempted such programs elsewhere in the country. And lastly, Jessica Taylor will be looking at the economic impact of co-working spaces on economic development in Erie County and using Radius CoWorks as a case study. But today, Corinne is our first and our most important presenter. As I said, Connecting Erie, an overview of high-speed passenger rail planning. Corinne Thomas is, besides being an alum of the Jefferson Civic Leadership Academy and a Ramey Fellow, she's the mental health clinical team leader at the Erie County Department of Human Services. In that role, she administers an array of services to support those experiencing challenges related to mental health, housing, and early development. She serves as the lead delegate to 302 involuntary petitions to assist those who are experiencing mental health emergencies and challenges. Prior to her current role, Corrine worked in administration related to drug and alcohol prevention, opioid use disorder grant management, and quality management. Prior to that, she gained many years of, well, not many years because she's not old enough to have had many years, but she gained years of hands-on field experience by working in various direct care causes. She's a magna cum laude graduate of Indiana University of Pennsylvania and has a master's degree in public administration from Gandon University. She also serves on the board of directors at Methodist Towers. And when she's not doing all of that, she is also the proud mother of a one-year-old daughter, Claire. Today, Corrine is going to tell us about Connecting Erie rail passenger service, and I'm going to turn it over to Corrine.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roth and Angela and Raven too. Really appreciate this opportunity. To start, I just wanted to give a little background as to how I came to having interest in this topic. As Dr. Roth said, my day job is not connected to this topic. I work in mental health and behavioral health services. But my husband experienced a layoff, and in his field, trying to get a position in Erie has been very challenging. Thankfully, he's since found another position, but in those conversations, he saw, the different opportunities in Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, but having just had a little child, we're both from Erie. We wanted to stay close to home. So moving wasn't ideal, but we talked about days in previous years. He had lived in the New York City area and used the commuter trains and lived in the suburb parts of Connecticut at times. And we talked about, what if someday Erie would develop that? What if Erie were eventually a suburb of Cleveland, Buffalo, or Pittsburgh? What would that do for the future of Erie? And that really spiked. That's how I came to having interest in the topic. And I brought that to Dr. Roth, and he said, well, dive in and learn about it. He encouraged me to learn about it. So that is the background of kind of how I came to picking this topic and why it was really a personal interest that brought me to this. And so what I'll do is really the first part of the presentation will focus on just a really brief background and history of rail historically in Erie. And from there, kind of try and tease out some themes that occurred historically, and might we apply those in present day planning, and then really explore key players, different groups that are doing a lot of work currently for planning. What I quickly learned is how massive this topic is, and how much work is already going on. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. Just move here. Okay. So the first railroad charter in Erie, it was approved in 1842. I have the stock certificate there to the left. It opened in Erie, PA, and went to the New York state line by January of 1852, and then eventually connected the railroad built in New York State from the state line to Buffalo, so continuing east. And then for the west part in the development, the stock certificate for the Franklin Canal Company is pictured there on the left. And that really was the development west towards the Ohio border. The full line from Erie to Cleveland, Ohio was opened by November in 1852. There's Union Station picture there. Those of you who are from here probably know that's located on West 14th Street currently, in between Sassafrash and Peach Streets, owned by Logistics Plus, and has the Amtrak station in there currently. But I thought it was interesting, the railroads that came together to form a construct of a Union Station. that was the New York Central and the Lakeshore and Southern Michigan Railroads. That was in 1865 through 1866 that they came together to construct that. The building there to the left was actually built in 1927. It was the first of the Art Deco styles of train stations in the US. And that was actually opened by the New York Central and Pennsylvania Railroads. And all these different railroad companies, I learned as I was reading, there were many, many smaller railroads that then consolidated, and they formed the New York Central system and the water level route. And they really did a good job, something I noticed, that marketing themselves in a positive way, and about the experience of rail travel. One quote I saw on an old time Erie blog spot said, providing a smooth and comfortable ride over a wondrous landscape. And I just, in our larger leadership cohort, we talked about marketing Erie in a more positive light as something that's important for the future of Erie as well. And it just caught my eye of how positively things were marketed historically. And then to think about interconnectivity, in 1868, this shows the horse-drawn streetcars. It's the Erie City Passenger Railway Company. It was on, this is the Second and State Station, but it ran from Holland south to 26th Street, where there were stables for the horses. But what this shows is really how then we had the railway that was east to west, but then in town, this was the interconnectivity piece. And this evolved to the electric trolley system, if you will. And the Erie Electric Motor Company laid tracks throughout the city and then further out. And if in there, it would go from 2nd and Holland and proceeded to State Street and then traveled south eventually to Peach, continuing to those stables that I mentioned. And then out and beyond, it would go to Hoffman's Grove, which is current day Waldameer. And this was also a positive marketing. It was a picnicker's paradise is how it was marketed.
I'll just jump in a moment on that slide, Corrine. I think one of the last remnants of it you can find in Erie is in the Edinburgh Diner, which no longer is called the Edinburgh Diner, but the front portion of it is actually one of those cars that was transformed into a diner.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. Now, I've dined there many times, but I didn't know that was one of those cars. Interesting. Thank you. Okay, and so with this, I just wanted to look at when I talked about teasing out those themes. So making the old new again. What can we take away from just even the very brief history there that I shared? But I thought that you could see positive marketing of the Erie region. Again, the interconnectivity piece. The consolidation of the different railways and all the challenges they had to overcome in development and in creating routes, the strategic partnerships that had to happen. And then also they really highlighted the efficiency and comfort of the experience, like again, selling that experience of the ride. And then also all of the job creation and the enhanced economy that comes about when you're putting infrastructure like this into place. So those were some of the things that stood out to me as I looked at the history and thought about present day planning and how that might tie in and what can we take from the historical piece. And then moving on to some key players. The Erie County Department of Planning and Community Development. Under that department falls the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And Mr. Michael Furman, I cannot thank him enough. I have it at the end of the presentation as well, but he took a lot of time in speaking with me and just explaining what kind of planning is going on right now. He is the executive director of All Aboard Erie, and he is the leader of it at the table for Lakeshore Rail Alliance, which I'll also explain later, but another really key player when we think of where we positioned regionally. Also Amtrak, PennDOT, and for PennDOT, they are a designated state rail transportation authority and also state rail plan approval authority. So they give the authority to prepare, maintain, coordinate, administer, review, and approve state rail plan. That is important because when I talked to our county department of planning, they explained how important the state rail plan is, and I'll get to that later as well. But knowing that brings so much more importance to PennDOT, and not just PennDOT, but then the way we're positioned, our neighboring states, the similar entities that would be similar to PennDOT, but in Ohio and New York. And then, as you can see, when I said earlier how large this becomes, these are just some of the bureaus that fall under PennDOT that have to be considered and have to approve things when we think about planning. Also, excuse me, Mr. Furman spoke about how important it is to be working with legislators, especially when you're thinking of accessing land and having uninterrupted rail lines. So how important the governing bodies are and the legislators as key players. And I'll talk more too. That is a big part. The advocacy piece of All Aboard Erie is a very big part of what they do. Also, the federal administrations beyond the state, I listed them here. As you can see, this is very large, lots of players. And then when we think more locally about the players and the momentum, I think of the Erie County Rail Commission, that there's recently been rescue plan dollars, $1 million was dedicated, and that was put together. Erie Insurance, just with all of their development, them being, and Logistics Plus, as they own the building where Union Station is and where the current train station is, Wabtec, and other companies that have a Pittsburgh base, like our Allegheny Health Network and UPMC. And Mike Furman, he spoke about how it's going to be so important to leverage the relationships with those companies as we try to think about different corridors and different routes that we'll want to see. Now getting into the timely legislature. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act became law in November in 2021. And from that, $66 billion is allocated to Amtrak rail development. That when I spoke to our Erie County Department of Planning and Community Development, Emily Alloys, she was very helpful. And she also explained, because of the size of Erie, really advocating that we be a part of these federal and state plans is what a town the size of Erie has to do, rather than have our own detailed plan like maybe a larger city may have. So just really, it's important to keep an eye on the federal and state level of dollars and then become a part of those plans in order to develop what we may be able to leverage here in town for Erie regional planning of rail. And again, Michael Furman emphasized the same thing, just having a strong presence with our planning and having regular interface with the legislators. He spoke a lot about the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which falls underneath the Erie County Department of Planning and Community Development, MPO. And I put a quote there that he gave us, MPOs give the green light for projects to get funded. So just really important player to note. And here, I wanted to highlight the Department of Planning and Community Development, as they're such a large player. When I spoke to Emily Alloys, she again she talked about how many different plans there are, not just locally, but at the state and federal level. This slide explains the plans that they really adopt locally and have written on their website. They're locally driven. They have to be updated every 5 years. They have to meet the federal and state guidelines. They have to have measurable set goals and objectives, and have to be prioritized and are fiscally constrained. And I'll get to in a couple of slides here just a listing, and also I embedded the links if you would want to click on them to look at the actual plans themselves. But the long range transportation plan, there's actually on their website a little YouTube video. It's about 7 minutes long, explaining kind of how they develop the plan and all of the community input that they get and how they prioritize the planning. And here the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which I mentioned, just to give definition to that and what an important piece this is. Their transportation policymaking board made up of representatives from local government and transportation agencies. Erie's MPO has 23 voting members, and they represent all of Erie. And here's the links to the different plans, as I noted. And actually, I thought this was timely. The most recent, the 2050 draft of the long-range transportation plan is actually being adopted by Erie's MPO today, which is a random coincidence. So, but I thought that was interesting to note. And in these plans, as I went through them, because I was really looking, do we have a plan that's specific to high-speed rail currently? And while these plans have excellent detail and they reference the high-speed rail planning as being something that we want to pursue, we don't have a specific plan that's just for the rail planning, is what I found. And I confirmed that then when I talked to Emily down at the Department of Planning and Community Development office. Okay, and to give more detail about the Lakeshore Rail Alliance, they're a coalition of 7 passenger rail organizations from multiple states. They unite, they really want to have a collective voice to push for better mobility, and their focus is the Lakeshore Corridor from Chicago to New York City. They propose that Amtrak operate at least 4 daily round trips from Chicago to New York. This comes in where Michael Furman says we really have to be at the table in planning and advocate. The hope is that we can have the trains stop at least 4 times daily in Erie instead of it stopping. We have the one stop now, and the hope would be to really increase that. And they also propose to upgrade tracks and improve train stations, and to have this be an interim step to actually high-speed rail. Emily explained to me that the tracks themselves would have to be replaced, that they could not handle actual high-speed rail, that they're designed for freight, that would be another undertaking in addition to trying to have these added routes, that is another big component of this. All right, and here I just noted the state plan. This is also a link to that plan. I went all through the state plan. A ton of references to increased freight routes for Erie. What I did not find was a true plan for increased passenger routes. And I think that is why there's so much advocacy right now. It actually did note Erie as one of 2 places that does not have a formalized plan right now for high-speed rail or for increased passenger rail stops at this time. So as far as this plan is concerned, and according to Emily, this is the most recent plan to reference, we aren't slated for increasing stops. And so that is really why it's important that we have advocacy groups. And if there are stakeholders who are viewing this and have interest in getting involved, I'll note some ways to reach out to advocate for really developing that. Because they did note in this plan different locations more towards the Harrisburg area or Philadelphia area, where they really are going to be increasing the thought of interconnectivity and commuter rails and different options for trains. But there really isn't that plan in this 2020 state rail plan. Where I was able to find some plans for increased stop was one added route trip, but this would be through federal dollars that Amtrak is receiving. That would be as a part of a new round trip from Cleveland to Buffalo. So an added stop is a starting point, but building upon that is something that we would want to do to see the enhanced, eventually enhanced routes, the vision that Mike Furman has explained. And here, this gives Amtrak's vision. And I thought it was interesting because it really aligns with when I talked to both Michael Furman and Emily, all of the important pros that we could gain if we have more momentum in rail planning for Erie, and if we eventually do see these added stops. This speaks about just how it's better for the environment. It would also improve equity, to have better access for people, to have transportation. When I think back historically, like the trolley system, if we could link the east to west rail and have more interconnectivity in town as well someday, that would really help with access. And also building all of that would create jobs. And then just this goes on to highlight more of Amtrak's vision. And it includes noting the added locations, the actual new places, the better service, and the additional people that would be served. Okay, and so this is the part to give more detail about how does all aboard Erie really fit in. And I spoke a bit to this before. Really, they're dedicated to bringing better passenger rail to Erie and improving public transportation in the region. That's right from their Facebook page, and the advocacy piece, as I spoke about before. Those 4 routes, that's really the primary thing that they're advocating for right now, for a corridor that would have, and this is where leveraging those businesses that have headquarters the south of us, if in addition to adding more routes in the east to west routes, if we could have a corridor that would have a southern loop and then pass through Erie as it went on to Buffalo and then Toronto. That's thought to be another way to have more access to Erie, more travel to Erie, all of those positive things that we think will come about by having greater options for rail and for also attracting people to come to Erie with greater ease. Again, the advocacy piece with legislators and different regulatory bodies, just how complex that is. That's a lot of what they're doing. They advocate for the interconnectivity piece, so not stopping with the rail, but also having the different connections of local plans eventually. And just they also, and this aligns with the Amtrak vision, advocate for how much this would do for enhancing green efforts and for the environment friendliness piece. And something I thought was really interesting that I hadn't thought about before is while we talked about the enhanced experience, but also just the enhanced socialization that could come about. And they advocate for that. And Angela, when we were talking before this, you kind of touched upon this, just interacting with people that you might not have interacted with otherwise, just having that experience of that social interaction if you're on a public mode of transportation. They advocate for that as being, a really positive thing that rail can bring. And then they also want to be a resource. They really want to when I reached out, they've reached right back immediately. We talked for a good hour, a solid hour. They gave resources. So they really, if you're interested and want to be a part of what is currently going on with rail planning, they're happy to help with that. And then I wanted to give a few examples of rail projects that are further along, that they're still in progress, but they're further along, just as some examples to consider as we think about future rail planning. Florida's Brightline. Now this is actually high speed. It's not just commuter, it's high speed. It connects from Miami to Orlando. When the project is fully completed, the thought is it will be about $4 billion of investment. And also, the thought is customization. So they really focus on the experience piece. You can get picked up. I was on their website. You can customize your whole experience. You can get picked up and go from door to door and have this efficient, full of amenities experience. So that's one project that's just interesting and to consider. The city of Charlotte, their 2030 plan, it really focuses on connecting people. So having all of these different modes from commuter, light rail, streetcar, and connecting all of that with the bus rapid transit. I thought this visual really gives a full picture of what might in years to come really enhance people coming to Erie and also people being able to go to different places, the larger cities that we've talked about. This kind of model I thought might really positively fit in Erie. And then Build High Speed Rail California. So this was the first high-speed rail project in the US. It's supposed to span from San Diego and then go north to San Francisco and then up to Sacramento. Again, similar themes and reasons of why people would adopt such a project. The job creation, the economic development, and the environmental friendliness, and connecting the different major regions and different major cities with more efficiency. This project, it's being built in what they call design build contracts. Before each section can be built, it has to go through an environmental clearance. And then these are the different construction contracts, packages, if you will, that they organize them into. And you can see the implementation dates. And I will say a criticism of this, and Dr. Roth, thank you, he sent me a relevant article related to this. The cost has been so above and beyond what they originally projected it to be, and then also the time in implementing. So that is a criticism of this, that it was maybe too big of an undertaking, is one of the criticisms of this. But it still is a project to look at as an example. I especially think the organization of it, if you just thinking of taking things in segments and starting somewhere, is one positive takeaway from this project. And to just give some final thoughts and takeaways, I put the contact information here. Like I said, if you do want to get involved, the County Department of Planning and Community Development welcomes you to call. There are numbers there. We double checked and made sure it was okay with them that you give them a call before we put out their info there. And I also wanted to highlight All Aboard Erie's website. Their Facebook page is here as well, with tons of resources and timely articles. The Erie MPO, they'll continue to work with federal and state entities for incorporating the Erie region in additional long-term strategic rail plans. So that's just important to note, all the hard work that is currently going on. While we don't have a lot of set dollars, what I was really looking for when I set out with this project was something that I found, like when I looked up Charlotte's plan, like an exact plan that was specific to rail planning with allocated set dollars. And we're not there yet, but we do have the players at the table to advocate for that and are working towards that. So I think that was an important lesson learned as I went through all of these different resources. And just something that was timely. I was watching 60 Minutes last week, and next week on 60 Minutes on March 13th, Anderson Cooper will interview the Secretary of Transportation, and he'll give an interview of about over $560 billion dedicated to rebuilding infrastructure for not just rail, but all different parts of transportation, highways, bridges, tunnels, airports. But I just thought that was really timely. Another resource, if you do have interest and want to gain more information, that will be airing next week. And then to close, just recalling the vision. Really, the vision is for us to gain those additional stops from Chicago to New York 4 times daily at least. And to really be a part of having some sort of a corridor plan that also aligns with the east and west routes. So with that, again, just a special thank you to Mr. Michael Furman and to Emily Alloys. They were both very, very helpful when I reached out to them, in addition to all the different resources that I looked at, but I couldn't have put this together without them. And thank you so much for your time. And with that, wondered if there were any questions.
Well, thank you, Corrine. That's a tremendous wealth of information on a topic I think most people don't know very much about. They've maybe heard about it. They may have read something very briefly in the newspaper, such as it is anymore, and maybe on the electronic media. So I thank you. That's probably the most comprehensive survey of the issue. I think I know, I don't have to think, no hedge. That's the most comprehensive survey of the issue of high-speed rail and rail passenger traffic in Erie that I've ever seen. So thank you. Now, there's I have some questions, and we talked about this as you did your research. And, you know, one of the very first questions is, and you have a slide on it, and as the presentation went by, I didn't notice the number of the slide, but you did have a slide where you enumerated some of the benefits of increased rail passenger service to communities like Erie. And one of the questions I have, and we can talk about a variation on this question in a minute, is what are those benefits, to kind of re-articulate them? You know which slide I'm referring to, I think.
Yes, yes, and I can get to that slide. And it aligns with the Amtrak vision, but really in thinking about well, first of all, the environment, decreasing emissions, the environmental friendliness, the efficiency of being able to get from one place to another without needing your vehicle, and really, if you think about the speed of high speed rail, how fast you could do that if you were trying to go to a city like Pittsburgh, Cleveland, or Buffalo. So it's the environmental friendliness, it's the comfort and the efficiency of it. It's the stimulation of economy, because we would then have not just people being able to leave Erie, but then people being able to come to Erie as well to stimulate the economy. And I want to bring up the Amtrak vision because they, yes, here we go. Whoops, I went back to the larger one and it switched. I'll flip here. But the Amtrak vision really articulates it well. safely connecting people. That's something I didn't say. Not only is it efficiently connecting people, but safely connecting people. Now in Erie, I would say reducing traffic isn't as much of a priority, but if you were from a bigger city, certainly. And also if you're in Erie and you're trying to work in a surrounding larger city, just because of the opportunities that they may have, that might come into play. And then the environmental factors, the climate change, and then the job creation, of course, and the equity, which is really another timely topic of just trying to make things more accessible for all, not just for people who have a car to be able to get efficiently to a job and to employment to better their lives, but really so that it would be user friendly for anyone from any socioeconomic status or background, that they would be able to have adequate and timely and clean and safe transportation.
And those are all, I mean, I think, almost inarguable benefits. But one of the things that, and I wondered if Michael Furman or Emily or any of the people, any of the documents you looked into talked about this. What's missing from there, and it just struck me during the presentation, and what's missing from there is the benefits to specific consumers and to the individual. My background, I have, amongst other things, a background in marketing, and one of the truisms in marketing is it doesn't matter what you and I want to do, it matters what someone else wants. And Angela had mentioned, earlier, and I've traveled in Europe, but Angela knows more about this than I do. Europeans are way ahead of Americans in terms of rail, but Americans for the last 100 years, this is 2022. Certainly the post-World War II era, but I'd say the last 100 years have been in love with automobiles and balloon tires. And I just read an article yesterday where we are right in the midst of a major revolution in transportation that someone, I don't know who I was reading this in and they're talking about electric vehicles and electric cars. Mm-hmm. And by 2030, which isn't that far away, in fact, say years, the sales curves are going to flip. It's flipping. There'll be more electric cars sold than gas combustion. But electric cars have none of these benefits, by the way. Electric cars bring with them all of the issues that gas cars do, although because they won't lower the climate, and they won't lower carbon emissions because electric cars have to be charged somewhere. And we still basically make electricity in this country by boiling water and burning coal. In France, it'll make a difference because in France, for example, most of their electricity is generated by nuclear energy that boils water to drive turbines. I mean, we basically make energy by boiling water. So whatever heat source you use. So electric cars, which are about to replace internal combustion cars, they share, though, one benefit with internal combustion cars that I'm not seeing the advocates for high-speed rail. And I think one of the things you could do, because you now know these people, is you could explain, you need to help them advocate for the fact, what's the benefit to the individual consumer? Why would a person give up a car to ride a train? The car has one great advantage over the train: convenience. It has many negatives, one of which you mentioned is socialization. You're all alone in your car, and also you're driving the car. You can't do anything else but drive the car. Although that might go away in the next 5 to 10 years with self-driving cars, because self-driving cars are incredibly effective on long-range interstates where they don't have to make many adjustments. There's still a struggle inside urban areas where there's all kinds of things happening at once. So have you encountered, the only reason I'm bringing that up is I'm asking you if did you encounter in any of the research anyone talking about at the individual consumer level why would I use a train as opposed to driving a car?
I did not, but that is an excellent observation and interesting point, especially in a town like Erie, where so many of us are really accustomed to not using public transportation, and we don't have the hassle, with our individual car. Like in larger cities with traffic, I think there is the motivation there, but maybe might that be why we don't have the momentum here as much, or the buy-in as much as in larger cities, because we don't have the hassles that come along. We have all the conveniences that come along with our individual cars. Yeah, that's such an
I was
excellent
thinking,
point.
the third question you and I discussed that you wanted me to ask you is, what are the largest barriers? And it just occurred to me listening to this. The two largest barriers to making this happen are, one, I was just astonished reading, well, I have the advantage over the audience. I saw this before, but reading your listing of all the agencies and all the players, public and private, that somehow have to be aligned to make this happen. And the other barrier I think we just touched on is getting people out of their cars. Now, $5 a gallon gasoline or $6 a gallon gasoline might do that.
This is true. This is true. Right.
Right. Well, I think it could also take shape in the form of access to work, to jobs. If the big cities have more access to jobs, it's worthwhile hopping on a train and making the hour-long commute every day, while you can still have just like your husband experienced it, still keep your residency in Erie, but you'll be much easier, especially maybe in the winter. It has to be a really good train in the winter though. But access, you be right in downtown or right at the airport if they connect the airports with it. That's what happened to the trains running between like on the western river side of Germany, the Rhine River, going up and down. The old trains were like in the valley. They stopped like every 15 minutes in another village. That's just time consuming, right? And they built this high-speed rail net that would connect all the way from Zurich, Switzerland, then to Frankfurt, then to Cologne, and up to into the Netherlands. And you save like so much time, not necessarily cheaper. I mean, those high-speed trains, they do cost more. So that's another question I had, like who's making sure that it's affordable?
Right.
Yeah, they're even more expensive, but yeah, you are right in downtown in the business centers. You don't pay for parking, and you don't sit in traffic jams, which is a big issue in more populated countries. That's just, people were getting tired of spending hours getting stuck.
Yeah.
I think the one thing you pointed out is actually really, I hope all aboard Erie can make it happen. If the Lakeshore Limited is in fact going to be upgraded, and the speed to get it to stop here 4 times a day would be a huge benefit for Erie.
Yes.
Because I think the benefit of this is, well, I got a couple of thoughts, because you did such an excellent job. You have so much information. The benefit of this is, I think, big city to big city, not so much small towns. And I don't mean that we cut the small towns out, but like Angela said about the train along the Rhine stopping at every little village. If you've ever been on the Lakeshore Limited from New York to Chicago, and if you took it from New York to Erie, it's stopped. Well, it used to. I haven't been on it, I confess, in probably over 35 years. But I did once ride it take it from New York City to Erie, and it stops at every little village along the Hudson. And then once it gets to Albany and then you have a big stop in Albany when they switch trains. And then as it heads west, it stops at I won't say every village, but it stops at every medium-sized city. So it takes you probably, I think you can drive from Erie to New York City, about, I drive slow, about 8 or 9 hours. I've had younger people tell me they can do it in 7 or 8. I don't want to know how they're doing it. But I think it's like 8 or 9 hours, but that train takes like 12 or 10 or 12. It's forever.
Right.
But the other thing is, you pointed out, I think it's very interesting, is that Charlotte, what they're planning, if they can pull that off, and it's interesting, it goes back to the history that you showed. If you build the trains that connect the cities, you then have to have intra-city,
Yes.
intra-urban transportation, because, okay, I took the train from New York to Erie, and I'm not from Erie. Okay, now what do I do? Because try to get a cab in Erie.
Right. Right.
Or figure out what the EMTA does. I do think you can get Ubers, but they're not as reliable as they once were. There's something going on that's beyond my understanding. But on the other hand, if you jumped on that train that stopped here 4 times a day and went to Chicago, or the other way around, went to Buffalo or New York City, or the really wonderful idea would be if it went to Toronto. Once you get there, those cities have very elaborate public transportation systems, everything from cabs and Ubers to buses and actually subways. Now, Chicago doesn't have a subway. It does have an overhead. So I don't know, Angela, you had some questions you
No,
wanted to
we do have an audience question. Raven, would you like to read out the audience question from our Facebook viewers?
I sure can. So our question's from Pat, and he said, thanks, Kareem. What groups will ultimately make the decision allowing Erie to be a stop on high-speed rail lines? Is it Amtrak, US DOT, PennDOT, or some other power?
From what I understand, our Metropolitan Planning Organization, they will really have control of what we'll actually finally do here. Now, they'll have to work with Amtrak, PennDOT, any other entities across state lines that are similar to PennDOT. They'll have to work with those governing bodies, but the project itself will have to be prioritized through and filter through the MPO, is how I understand it. I'm sure there are many nuances to that, and that is a major oversimplification of an answer. But when I did speak to Emily and Michael, they both did say that any decisions and prioritization of set plans would go through the MPO. Thank you for the question. Good question.
Angela?
I think you almost answered the question, but what is your point of view here? What went you through your mind when you did the research that, you know, you probably checked out other countries, and Japan was the birthplace of high-speed rail. There's the European rail network, then China is surpassing everyone with 27,000 miles of operational lines. But still, and I think Andy touched on it, what do you think is the biggest factor that keeps the US lagging? It doesn't look like it's investment anymore.
So this is a guess on my part, but I do think that it's navigating through the legislation because of the influence of the automobile industry. Like I do think that is probably a large barrier, and as we talked about, just all the different entities. I do think that that if we had these huge efficient train routes like over in Europe, it would really hurt all the jobs and money that come about from having more automobiles and having highways and having the upkeep of highways. I think that there is probably a strong influence there, and that might be why we don't see more movement when folks like All Aboard Erie or different entities do try to advocate with legislators. That is the best guess. I don't know for sure, but that is what came to mind when I read through your question, Angela, as why we might not be as far along. Also, the physical landscape, just the size of states, whereas so many countries are maybe the size of states, navigating all of the different rules from state to state, I think might pose. And that, again, like, so what we have, what I listed out just in Pennsylvania, and then those other federal entities, there's all of those for Ohio, so certainly the federal entities wouldn't change, but they would have their whole list and slew of entities similar to PennDOT and all the different bureaus that fall below PennDOT. Those would be my top two reasons, I would say. I'm not sure if anyone else has other thoughts about that, though. I'd be interested to hear.
I think you're spot on. The challenge for rail in the United States is, like we both said a couple of minutes ago, about 100 years ago, America made it. 100 years ago, America had one of the most elaborate rail networks in the world, arguably the most elaborate rail network in the world. And we essentially abandoned that and swapped it out, particularly after World War II, for highways and balloon tires. Probably because of individual convenience. I think that was consumer driven. It's somewhat controversial. Ralph Nader, for example, would disagree with me a little bit on that. But I think you're right that the automobile is so ingrained into American culture, and even with this transition to electric, you don't really change the fundamentals. You just change some of the you don't even change the players, with Ford going to all electric cars by, gosh, I don't know, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Ford has made a really aggressive statement that all of their automobiles will be electronic by 2030. And I think General Motors has an equally aggressive statement that they won't be building internal combustion cars anymore. But you made the comment, Corrine, and you're absolutely right about the economic impact of automobiles. This statistic is probably out of date, but I remember some years ago, 1 out of every 6 jobs in America is in some manner, shape, or form connected to the automobile industry. Now, that may have changed after the 1980s because of the ascendancy of Japanese and German and Korean automobile makers. But even they now make their cars in the United States. Most Hondas are made in Marysville, Ohio. Most Hondas sold in America are made in Marysville, Ohio. And most BMWs, which are on the verge of becoming a somewhat common car, are made in Spartanburg, North Carolina, I think. And well, there's still, so that's a challenge. I still would like to see the Lakeshore Limited stop here 4 times a day. I would take it to Chicago.
Likewise, I would take it. I would take it for sure. I had a friend who recently took it, and they couldn't say more about how comfortable it was and what an enjoyable experience, and how when they went to New York, and how when they got there, they weren't so tired and they didn't have all the hassles when they arrived, so there are those benefits, they were just going for leisure, but there's those that are, that's a component for now. But I think in the nearer future, looking forward to that, it is something that is feasible. The larger plans, would be decades away and decades of planning. But.
Well, I'm looking at the clock. I want to thank you. I think you did an excellent job. And like I said, in terms of a survey of the whole topic, that's the most thorough and informative one that I'm aware of. So thank you on behalf of the Jefferson and the Ramey Fellows. You set the bar high for your colleagues.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who took the time to view and for all your help in this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Corrine. Thank you, Ramey Fellow, Corrine. So the Ramey Fellows will actually go to Washington, D.C. in May, and I hope that we're going to meet with one of the leaders on Capitol Hill to further discuss infrastructure in high-speed rail. So Keep that in mind when we go. Take your presentation with you. So very, very good. Thanks for everyone watching along. Thanks for tuning in. These programs and discussions and the exchange of information wouldn't be possible without you viewers and our patrons at the Jefferson. For more information about the Jefferson, including how to register for additional events, please visit jeserie.org and be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram, subscribe to our YouTube channel. For the Jefferson Education Society, I'm Angela Beaumont. Thanks so much for listening and learning with us.